To someone who liked very much the very popular piece of Beethoven, the septet, Beethoven said one time, "In the days I composed my septet, I did not know how to compose. Now I think I do know, and now I shall write something better." And he was speaking about his Hammerklavier Sonata. So the Hammerklavier Sonata is a very important moment in the life of Beethoven. He changed, or had already changed, his way of composing. It took Beethoven at least 2 years to compose this monumental and powerful sonata, the years 1817 and 1818. And you have to consider it as a symphonic sonata. Therefore, the piece is absolutely comparable with great pieces as the Missa Solemnis and Symphony No. 9, composed just after the Hammerklavier Sonata. Typical for the style of late Beethoven is an enormous concentration on very limited, mostly very simple material, and a strict developing of that simple material. Also typical is his very wide range of emotions, going from pure serenity to incredible passion. Beethoven was an optimistic person, but however, we find in his music also feelings which are really depressed, also in Opus 106. But Beethoven always wanted to liberate himself from these depressing feelings. The simple idea, the simple material in this sonata is the interval of the third. Going up, going down. Never Beethoven composed a large piece that depended so completely on one single musical idea and the endless transformations of that short motif. And that basic interval you find at the beginning of all the 4 movements. The piece starts in the second movement here. All the time, thirds. And then in a wonderful way, the adagio, ascending. It's possible to make of the third a tense, or even bigger. That happens in the beginning of the first movement. And that happens also in the subject of the fuga in the last movement. So there is a big similarity between the beginning of the first movement and the fuga. And then you understand that in the sonatas of late Beethoven, The movements are not separated. Beethoven is composing one continuous story which is absolutely coherent. But not only in the themes, the third is important, also in the harmonies and in the tonalities. In a classical sonata, the second theme is nearly always in the dominant. The dominant of B flat major is F major, but that is a tonality which you don't find at all in this sonata. You find always tonalities which are at a distance of a third. And that means in B flat major, for instance, G major, S-dur, B minor, and so on. And that you find not only in the first movement, but also in the other ones. It's the first time that Beethoven is composing a piece which is using a simple idea so consequently. Now something about the first movement. First of all, I want to say something about the tempo. Beethoven is giving two indications, but they are contradictory. He writes allegro, not molto allegro, not presto, normal allegro. And that is not extremely fast. But his metronome indication is extremely fast. So the question is, what is true? Indication allegro or the metronome indication? And I choose for allegro and not the extreme fast metronome indication. And I follow in that way great players like Willem Kempf and Rudolf Serkin. It's interesting that Beethoven dedicated this piece to his best friend. That was Archduke Rudolf, a very important man and a very musical man. And Beethoven composed many of his best pieces to this man. And the main motive he composed originally for a vocal piece dedicated to the birthday of Rudolphus. And the text of that motet was Vivat Rudolphus. Vivat Rudolphus. And when you speak that, you immediately feel what could be the right tempo. But Vivat Rudolphus is a very joyful text. And I think it's important to play the beginning as something of great energy, but joyful energy and not aggressive energy. Beethoven writes fortissimo, but it means very powerful, but a generous way of power. But then immediately you have something which is typical for Beethoven. Beethoven is looking for the opposite thing. In the answer of the second part of this theme, the joyful message of the beginning becomes a point of discussion. Are we really so joyful? Yes. Completely other world. It's interesting, he writes, again a third, but the third is filled in. That continues. there's something very interesting here. I said it is very joyful, but when you listen to the harmonies, and I play it a little bit slower, there's something complicated in the romantic way he is using the intervals. So it's the joy is mixed with something very serious and maybe something of bitterness. A little bit later, after some bars, the main motif comes back, and then Beethoven makes a fascinating modulation to G major. And I will explain how he is doing that. Suddenly there's a bare octave, and that becomes the dominant of G major. Fermate, and then a preparation for the second theme. And then starts the second theme, which is in G major. G major in Beethoven's time was a gentle tonality. You have only to think to the Piano Concerto number 4 to understand what I mean. And this theme is very interesting because there's not one melody, but at least two. And both left hand and right hand are speaking together with each other. This is the first part of a second theme group. And it was a kind of dialogue. But then it is followed by a theme where I feel a little bit the texture of a string quartet. Now, there's something very interesting in this theme. I said the whole piece has to do with descending thirds. When I go down, and I change one descending third in an ascending sixth, you get this theme. Because actually, Beethoven is using only one interval and the inversion of that interval. And now we come to a part of a theme where the harmonies become very expressive and very warm. You remark that the themes are extremely rich, and the meaning of the themes is all the time changing. Where, on the moment that I stopped, is coming in a kind of motif which sounds wonderful on a violin. But there is also something there's a kind of a little conflict between E flat and E natural. And that's typical for this sonata. There is all the time a kind of fight, a kind of contrast between elements of major and minor. And the minor side is always more the shadow part of life. The second group of themes is very wide, very rich, and now is coming maybe the most beautiful theme. And Beethoven is giving at least 3 indications for the performance. He writes cantabile, dolce, et expressivo. And again, we have here the mixture of major and minor. So all the time, the joyful part and the part of shadows is a point of discussion. And that is typical for Beethoven and the way he is constructing his sonata movements. But then he is transforming, changing the meaning, and that expressive theme becomes again a point of joy and exultant even. That's a dramatic moment. That's what you expect, but it's... Then we are at the end of the exposition, and he returns to the beginning. I play once more the beautiful theme and the continuation. But when we come the second time, Beethoven is not playing, but then the meaning is very positive. But then he continues in C minor. Then main motive of the beginning, that signal is coming, but now in S-dur. And then we are in the middle of the development. And in Beethoven's music, the development is mostly the most dramatic part. And the meaning and the starting point of this sonata, the joyful birthday present, becomes a really point of discussion. And the fugato, which is starting now, starts in a positive way, but it becomes more and more dangerous. it becomes dramatic and really dangerous sometimes. It's interesting that the first motif, he makes a little bit longer, and together is the subject of that fuga theme. It starts with 2 voices, but now we have 4 voices. Then it continues, but after some bars, it's in C minor, and then the music becomes a little bit more frenetic. And now we come to the most dramatic part of the development. You have still the main motive. That is a terrible action, and then there's an answer. It tries to take away that terrible feelings. And we had some terrible dissonance. And finally, we come on the dominant of D major. But then is passing a miracle. That fantastic theme from the second group comes back, but now it is in another tonality. It is minor, and it is very sad. And all the time you have that hesitating between major and minor, which is a fascinating element of this sonata movement. But we are now in the tonality of B major, and we feel we have to go back to the main tonality to start a recapitulation. But we are still quite far from that tonality. And it is only at the last moment that Beethoven makes a modulation, and then B flat major comes back as a triumph. What is very typical for Beethoven, that the recapitulation is not a repeating of the same things. It's more like a reinterpretation. And this is happening also here, because in the second part of the first theme, Beethoven is making a modulation to G flat major. He is not keeping the main tonality, no, he is going in completely other way, and that is very unusual in a recapitulation. then instead of this, we have now we come to one of the most crucial, most fundamental moments of the piece. Beethoven has reached G flat major, but at a certain moment he stops on the subdominant with a bare twin. But he is using it as if it's the dominant of B minor. And suddenly, the main motive of the beginning, the symbol of joy, comes back in B minor. And he writes, I have to keep the pedal longer. And that is a dramatic moment. And then he decides, however, to go back to B flat major. And then things are going as you expect in a recapitulation. But this moment, the touching of B minor is important because that will happen also in the other movements. The moment that B minor comes, it's the completely other side of the medal, the tragic part, the dramatic part of life against that starting point which was so extremely joyful. I don't speak about the recapitulation, but I will say something about the coda. The coda is quite long, and at the end of the coda, the mood becomes more and more mixed. It is not joyful, it is not tragic, it is a mixture of opposite feelings. I just start here. All the time you hear and the contrast. So there is a double bottom. It is not joyful, there is a tragic mixture of emotions. So actually the end of this first movement is quite different from the extremely positive beginning, and it will be extremely interesting to find out how this sonata will develop after this movement. Now I like to say something about the second movement, and that is the scherzo. Beethoven is placing the scherzo before the adagio and not, as usual, after it. And he will do that in the same way also in Symphony number 9. Consequently, the expressive weight of the adagio has been transferred to the second half of the sonata. So first and second movement is one great part, adagio, and fugue is the second part. again, it is difficult to define or give a definition of the character of the scherzo, because there are contradictional feelings, contradictional characters in it. Some pianists consider the scherzo as a parody, kind of joke, on the first movement. I think Beethoven liked very much jokes, but this piece is not a joke. It seems playful, and the beginning is also playful. But later on, there are many parts in minor tonalities, and then it becomes more dark and sometimes even sinister. It's interesting that the phrasing of the first, the number of the bars is not 8, but 7. Classical music is built often with groups of 8, and Beethoven makes it a little bit more narrow. And in that way, the phrasing is not as you expect. It's very funny or interesting to see that the end of the phrase is always pum pum, and that becomes an important element later in the piece. But now we are on the dominant of B flat major, but Beethoven is making a modulation. Suddenly, again, bum bum. All the time escaping to C minor. Then it becomes mysterious and a little bit sinister. And Beethoven needs a kind of force to come back to C minor. C minor has a great attraction, but he is able to escape to it. But then with the crescendo, and then this is coming the trio, the middle section, and as an echo, in the left hand. There's a kind of dark memory of the Eroica symphony. And then the theme comes in the left hand, and in a very secret way, there's something of a canon between the right and the left hand. On the moment that you expect that the trio will come back, there is an interpolation of a section which is also in minor, and that is F minor. And that is a very exciting part. It's really dramatic. And then the scherzo comes back, but at the end there is something wonderful, something very special. I said already that a very important moment in the first movement is the recapitulation, where you heard the main theme in B minor. Now, something comparable is happening in the scherzo. Just before the end, there is some bars in B minor, and again Beethoven had great effort. It's very difficult. It takes a lot of willpower to conduct the music back to the main tonality. And that is again a very dark, a very black moment in the piece. What happens? In B minor? At the last moment, it comes back, but it's a really great effort. And then starts the second movement. I have to tell you something interesting about the second movement. Half year after Beethoven had finished this piece, the composing of this piece, he added one bar to the adagio. And everybody was surprised. Is it necessary to add to a piece of 45 minutes 2 notes? I will play the beginning of the adagio first without the 2 beginning notes. So immediately it starts with the right melody. But finally, Beethoven added 2 notes. And that is wonderful, that difference. A pianist, I think, Maynard Solomon, said, it is as if you enter a sacred place. It's a moment of elevation. This adagio is the longest movement in a sonata ever composed by Beethoven. The proportions are large, but all the themes are also large. And I will play the first theme, and that is not less than 26 bars. It's also interesting to see that Beethoven is asking to play all these bars with the left pedal. And there is something interesting in the indication for the performance. Beethoven writes adagio sostenuto, but he is also saying appassionato. So in a slow, very slow movement, he wants that there is also passion. And that is so typical for Beethoven. His serenity is never without passion, and his passion has also always something of serenity. Both elements are not strictly separated. And that is difficult for the performer. Some people play it terribly slow. That is not right because, and that is also exceptional, sometimes during not less than 6 bars, Beethoven writes ritardando. And when your main tempo is already very slow, you cannot make ritardando. lot of things you can say about this theme. First thing is the end is open. It opened the way for the next theme. And that's also typical for the late Beethoven. He has a wonderful way of connecting phrases. For me, this theme is quite religious. I consider it as a prayer. That is not so strange, because just after this piece, Beethoven started to compose the Missa Solemnis, which is a religious piece, and that piece he considered as his most important piece he ever composed. It is about grief, it is very sad, but at a certain moment you have a glimpse of hope where Beethoven suggests the tonality of G major, but actually it is Neapolitan harmony. For me, that is a kind of shining from heaven. In the first movement, G major was also something very shining. It's also something, comparable. After this first theme, we have the second element of the first theme, and then the intervals become wider, and I have to leave the left pedal, it becomes without left pedal, and Beethoven writes con grande espressione. It's very curious that there's a bar where the figurations are like a foreshadowing of Chopin. Externally, it's a little bit like Chopin, but inside it is very different from Chopin. Now we start in bar 36, and transition, and there comes a modulation to D major. And that is a moment where you feel that Beethoven writes, not for nothing, appassionato. Suddenly, piano, also typical Beethoven. Now we arrive in D major, the second theme group, and we arrive at a theme in major. And then the sadness, the grief is changing. It's more hopeful, and very beautiful is the descending chord. It's not so far from the last movement in Sonata Opus 111. I just play a little bit of that theme. And then we come to the second part of this theme, and then that's also typical for Beethoven. All the voices are rising, and especially also the bass. Kind of elevation. And after that, it's going down in a chromatic way. I will show that a little bit. And suddenly, I have to put again the left pedal. It's very clear that it is coming back to sadness. But we are not yet at the end of the exposition. Now is coming the final sentence, the closing sentence, and now it is not sad, it is more accepting things like they are, resignation, but resignation without bitterness. But now we are exactly on the point where starts a development. It's curious when you hear this last sentence, you can hear that Brahms listened very well to this kind of music. I spoke already about the idea of descending thirds in this piece. And there is a place in the development where you have more than 30 descending thirds. That is really a miracle. I will show that. At a certain moment you have this here. And now it starts here. now we arrive at the recapitulation. When I play only the right hand and I change the ascending sixth in the descending third, it's like this. The piano is too short. But still going on. Until he's coming on the dominant of V small, and then the recapitulation starts. I said already in the first movement that Beethoven likes not to do the things in the recapitulation in the same way. And that happens also here. The first theme is now coming in a wonderful variation in the right hand. And instead of the melody notes, Beethoven is all the time playing around the main notes. You feel still the meaning and the expression of that theme, but it is hidden in fantastic decorations. So this becomes and now, in the left hand, the notes are not coming on the beat, but just after. And that is extremely delicate, terribly tender. Now we are nearly at the end of the first theme, and then Beethoven is also changing. The harmonies become deeper, and the bass line becomes deeper, and also he writes at a certain moment ritardando, and then the music starts to sound more tired, as someone who is so full of grief that he cannot go forward with any energy. That's a very moving moment and so different from the first time where the movement was still going in a normal way. The same way as the first time, there's an open ending. And now is coming the second part of the first theme, but not in Fi small, but now in D major. And in the beginning, it sounds very, like something of heaven, something very positive. Completely different from the first time. But now it's changing because Beethoven is leaving D major and is going to B minor in the same way as in the other movements. And Beethoven said one time, B minor is for me the black tonality, the sinister tonality, just something negative. Just now that beautiful theme is changing in something which is nearly becoming desperate. For me, late Beethoven is so fantastic because the meaning of his phrases is all the time changing. And when you expect, you understand that it is changing. So the story is terribly rich. After this really terrible moment, Beethoven returns to tonality of F sharp and even F sharp major. And then this theme comes back. I said already, the recapitulation is finishing in F sharp major. But then this movement is not yet at an end. There's a coda consisting of 35 bars. And it starts in 153. And on that moment, there's a transition to G major. G major, I said already, was in the first theme a moment of hope, a moment of something of utopia. And now the second theme comes back in that tonality, and it sounds a little bit like a shining light. But then it's changing, it's modulating, And the music becomes nearly a little bit desperate and scaring and ending with something of a cry. I will play once more. That is maybe the most dramatic moment of the whole movement. Out of the sound of that desperate moment, the first theme comes back in original form, only it is now much shorter. It's contraction of it. I will play that. And again, Beethoven writes ritardando, very unusual. And now, there's a moment in Vis Dur, and that's for me like a wonderful enlightenment. There's a light shining, and the sadness is transformed in something completely different. So the last time, only a little fragment of the theme. We come now to the last movement, an enormous fugue. But before we start the fugue, there is an extremely interesting introduction. After the stillness and resignation of the last really exhausted bars of the adagio, the question is how to come out of that feeling of stillness, which you could consider as devotional prayer, and how to get new energy in order to start the last movement and restore the tonality of B flat major and bring back the energy. That is exactly the task of that introduction. This adagio was ending F sharp major. But now Beethoven is transforming that in G flat and then is going down one note. And we enter a completely new world, a world of mystery. And then listen to the steps in the bass. So again, the principal motive, the descending third. And then on this moment, there's a resting place. And Beethoven is trying a kind of theme, and maybe it's the way to continue. That is beautiful, but not possible to go in that way. Again, descending third. Now a little bit more active. Again, 1/3 lower. Now, we passed the resting place, number 4, and we are not far from the dominant of F major, of B flat major. But before Beethoven is making that definite step, he is gathering new energy by a rhythmical motif. Then we have reached the start of the fugue. And the theme of that fugue is very interesting because it is so long. It's 10 bars. But later, when you analyze the fugue, it becomes clear that actually the theme is not more than 6 bars. The last 4 bars mostly Beethoven omits. I said already that the start of the theme that was very connected with the beginning of the first movement. I like to tell you something about the very special character of this fugue. In fugues of late Beethoven, the composer always tries to concentrate on the most severe mental discipline and reach in that way the greatest concentration. And in this fugue, Beethoven is doing something very special. First of all, it is a dramatic fugue. So the dramatic character of sonata form, he is transposing also to the world of the fugue. And secondly, it's so that every time that the theme is treated another way, the character is changing, and also the tonality. So there's a universum of tonalities. And the texture, that is the idea of fugue. So actually he connects sonata form, variation form, and fugue form. And that is something very original. Beethoven is not afraid in his fugues to use dissonances, and his voice leading sometimes is quite harsh, but that is his way to liberate himself from the depressing feelings. It's interesting that there are 2 counter subjects, and the first is the and that is the only moment that the fugue has just an element of lyric feelings. And the second counter subject is here. And also you find, that's also typical, a lot of sforzati, and that is adding to the energy. And Beethoven is absolutely not afraid to, what I said, to use dissonances. Another thing is the fuga is consisting of 7 sections. And the first section is bringing the theme subject in B flat major, in D flat major, and in E flat major. And at the end of that section, there is a kind of episode, and then the music is a little bit more gentle, a little bit more playful for some bars, and then it is again becoming dramatic, and then we come to the second section, and in the second section, Beethoven is making the augmentation of the subject, just every note 2 times longer. But before we come, I play a little bit of the episode. then here it is starting. There is something very special. In the classical time signature of 3 times, you have to think heavy, light, light. But many times here, Beethoven gives an accent on every note of the beat. And that makes the character stronger, but that is a very anti-classical principle. This is one of the most dramatic moments in the whole fugue. And because the tonality is as small, I think this is a terrible trying to liberate him from terrible things. Now, Beethoven is using not only the theme completely, but only a part of it. The first 2 notes, and that is going in this way and in this way, and that is a little bit like an earthquake. It's a clash, really, of voices. And in an incredible way, he is able to relax and to pass these terrible moments. And then the episode, which was more relaxed, is coming back. And so on. And then we come to the 3rd section of the fugue, and there Beethoven is choosing immediately another tonality. From S-dur he is going to B minor, the important negative tonality in the whole piece. And there he is using the subject, what he call crep-wise. He starts with the last note and is going back to the beginning. And then the theme subject is changing completely of character. The direction is quite weak. It is also soft. It is, everything changed. And instead that the trill starts with energy, it's rounding off the theme. I play only one time, only that theme, crep-wise. At the end is a trill. But what makes it more interesting is that Beethoven is putting another counter subject against it, and that is more singing. And then you feel something of solitude in that music. So it's an island of stillness in this terrible fugue. After this moment is coming soon, the 4th section, where the theme is used inverted. So every changing of direction. But before we are there, the theme comes one time back in D major, and then it sounds very positive. Now, a little bit later, it's coming the inversion. And that is not in B minor, but in G major, and that is more positive. And finally, it's leading to the next section, but before that is coming, we have a very special moment where the first two notes of the theme are played shorter. It's all the time like this. Then pause. And what will happen? And then is coming a very crucial section. Suddenly, the storm is over, and there's coming another fugue inside the fugue, like a theater in a theater. And now is coming back something of the second movement, the feeling of prayer. And we feel a little bit the neighborhood of the Missa Solemnis, which Beethoven started already to compose at the end of this sonata. We are, for a moment, in the tonality of D major, but at the end, Beethoven modulates to B flat major, and then that tonality is keeping until the end of the piece in order to restore the harmonic balance. There must be enough bars in the main tonality to keep the sonata stable. I start just a little bit before the moment that the tonality of B flat major comes back. And when you hear well, at a certain moment, the main theme is combined with that beautiful singing theme. And then the stillness is over, and the temperament of the fugue is coming back. And now we come in a section where we have several forms of stretto. But it's interesting that Beethoven is not making stretto 2 times with the same treatment, but he is combining rectus and inversion. So the left hand is at the right hand is doing. So they jump in opposite way. And so on. So it is a very stormy passage. And later on, Beethoven makes a stretto, and that is even more exciting when the theme is not coming one after the other, but they are coming on the same moment. So inversion and rectus. That happens in bar 333. And that is one of the most temperamentful passages of the whole piece. And it is incredible how dissonant it is. That is something really terrible. Now we are not far from the end, and I will play just the bars before the coda starts. And there you have one of the most terrible dissonances in the whole piece. Then a pause and starts the coda. And on this dark moment, the theme comes back in a very mysterious way. So actually, in the fugue, we have 7 different sections. Every section has its own treatment of the subject. Every section has a special tonality, and together they form the real form of the piece. And at the end, just after you have the theme in the most darkest version, the first notes of the theme come back, and they make a kind of triumph ending of this great piece.